Hi, hello. My name is Diane Benson. I am the Director of Academics and Counseling with HomeLife Academy, and I am here with Charla McKinley. And
yes, all right.
Charla McKinley. And Charla, you want to tell us a little bit? I understand that you've got some really cool information and products relative to personal finance.
Yes. So first, thanks for having me. We have been in partnership with HomeLife Academy for many years, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak and sort of tell you about my program. My program is very unique. It was an idea. I'm not a curriculum writer. I simply am a homeschool mom. My son was in the 7th grade and he was not, I knew that I wanted to teach him financial literacy, and he was not interested in what I purchased for him. So I just took it upon myself, as homeschool parents. We're so used to this, but I just wrote my own curriculum and just trying to prove a point, basically. And it was so effective that the rest is history. This is our 10th anniversary this year. And what makes it so effective, what's different, is that instead of being technical, like the technical aspects of personal finance, I do have that, of course, but it's more personal. In my experience, when I was trying to teach my son, he just didn't care. He didn't care about saving money, or how why credit cards were bad, or compound interest, or maybe a little bit of interest in the stock market. That kind of sounded a little interesting, but basically I could not spark his interest until I showed him why he needed to care, and that was by letting him design his own life from age 22 to 42. So that's what my curriculum does. So instead of just teaching about a car, why to buy used and depreciation and leasing versus buying, I let the student buy their own car using the money that they have in savings from the career they chose in the first lesson. So every single lesson, they're designing their life using choices they actually make. So like I mentioned, lesson 1, they start with a career, and that pays them the salary, and then they're off and running to live their life from 22 to 42. It is super impactful, because then all of a sudden they understand, oh, wait, hold up. If I don't have enough money for a car, I have to get a loan, and therefore I pay more than I would if I just had cash. And it's like, yes, you got it.
So if we can kind of back up and, like, from the big picture, I guess a couple things. Why do you think teaching personal finance is so important on providing our students a strong basis there? And do you feel like it's something that maybe has been lacking, or that they're needed this new twist on?
Yeah. So, money, regardless of what else we're teaching them as homeschool parents, we know definitively that money is going to be in their life every single day of being an adult. And what I have experienced, my parents did not teach me about money. They were embarrassed that they didn't have any. They were afraid that I would be judgy on them in terms of how they were spending their money, especially if what I had learned was the right way and they were doing the wrong thing. Like if I teach them about credit cards, if I learn about credit cards and then I turn around and see that my parents have credit cards, now all of a sudden it's like, and so a lot of times parents either don't know themselves what the right thing is because they weren't taught, or they feel like I'm doing the wrong thing and I don't really want to be pointed out. So yes, I think that we haven't focused on that as much as we should. And I think also when this was back in 2014, and I went to the homeschool curriculum fairs and I picked up personal finance, and it was just dry and boring. It was like, you're at the grocery store and they offer a 5% discount. How much will that be? And it's good to know, of course, but when I sat down with my son to try to figure out why he was so bored with what I was showing him, he was like, Mom, this is all fine, but this is for poor people. I'm going to be rich. And he wasn't even talking about winning the lottery or making millions as an influencer. He literally thought that making $60,000 a year as an engineer was rich. And when you look at his allowance, $20 a week, and then all of a sudden he's making $60,000 a year, you can understand why they draw the conclusion that they're going to be rich. So if the paradigm that they are viewing the world through is that they're going to be rich, then telling them that they need to cut coupons or, watch their credit score, it's like, this doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
It's not like they think it's not true. It's not real for them because it's not going to apply for them. And so to me, that's the most important reason to do this, because it's not until you show them, hey, if this is the career that you are choosing, and if these are the life choices you're making, car, apartment, house, you get married, you have children, if you got a misalignment here, and you can see it very clearly in the class, you're doing the budget on Google Sheets, then something needs to be fixed. And that it's eye-opening for these teenagers because they never thought of it before, because they've never really been exposed to it before.
Right. And what ages do you recommend beginning teaching children about money and finances?
Yes.
And responsibilities of that?
Yeah. Well, you know what? The reason why I recommend early is because there is so much to teach our kids. And by the time they are teenagers, most of our kids, not all, and surely I know, I have got 2 kids. My son knew it all, and he loved me dearly, and he wasn't mean or hateful or anything like that, but his mind was closed. He thought he already knew all that was going on. My daughter is not quite like that, but she also was pretty dismissive of what I have to say relative to, like, just the other day, she wasn't feeling well. She was sick. And I said, baby, I think you need to sleep more. And she's like, Mom, you don't get sick because of sleeping badly. That's not how germs work. It's like, so with these attitudes, and y'all, both of these kids really do love me. So I don't have those angsty teenagers, but still, that is not the age that you want to wait to deal with something as important as money, because we need to get them to understand money. And I'm afraid if we wait too long in those years, their mind will be closed and the lessons will not stick. So what I recommend is, and I've got a blog, and every single week I put out advice on this kind of thing. I also have a podcast. And what I'm constantly saying is, early on, talk to them about money, get them comfortable with money. An allowance type thing. I don't necessarily think you have to start an allowance at age 3 and go all the way up to 18. That's exhausting. But, there are times and situations to look for opportunities to teach them about money when they're young, because, when they're really young, they're around you all the time. And so to be talking to them like, hey, why do you think Mommy is driving by this grocery store to go to that grocery store? Is Mommy so silly? No, let me tell you why. Or look at these 2 mustards. What do you think? Look at the price. What is going on? Like, they're always around. Then they get a little bit older. They're able mentally, those sort of late elementary years, they're still sweet. and they're inquisitive, and they're ready for lessons that are a little bit deeper, and that's when I recommend giving them an allowance, but making them use it. It's not just at their discretion. Here, use it if you want. No, it's from here on, I'm not going to, my son loves candy. From here on, I'm not going to buy you candy. Instead, I'm giving you money so that you may buy the candy that you would like. And of course, that begins to introduce money tension, because my son would love way more candy than he can afford. And so little things like that. And then, of course, as they get older, I've got a couple of different options on money. I just introduced a tween version where instead of designing your adult life from 22 to 42, like I have my teenagers do, I have the tweens design their teenage years. And so that's kind of fun because, now it's like, oh, you're 13 years old, are you going to mow the lawn, or are you going to babysit? Trying to get them to earn some money. I present them with items to buy in the shop. And of course, again, they're seeing that money tension as they get to age 16. And now it's time for a car. And it's like, oh no, you don't have enough for a car. What could you do? That kind of thing. So I have products beginning at age 8, and then going all the way up to 18.
Right, very good, very good. So have you had any students who kind of, as they worked through this already, be noticing like, oh my goodness, there's such a mismatch. The world is so different than I thought it was going to be financially. And what kind of responses are you seeing from the kids when they realize that for themselves?
Yes, I see it and hear it all the time. I love it so much. One of my favorite things is going to the convention and seeing my students come up and, tell me all their stories, and their parents just, like I had one, I just got back from the Ohio conference, and I had one mom, and she's like, this changed my son's life. Thank you so much. He was really struggling with trying to understand what he was going to do for a career. And because this thing starts with having them choose a career. And of course, I tell them this isn't, you're not signing a contract. Pick what you think you might want, play it out in spreadsheets, and then you'll begin to understand. Just, you'll begin to take these steps. And, I had one kid who, and I teach it live in the Raleigh area just so I can keep my finger on the pulse of, what's in the minds of these kids. And I had one kid, and he was trying to decide between being a composer and being an engineer. And, unfortunately, our world does not value monetarily composing like it does engineering. And I also explain this to the kids. We have a lesson on business in my class, and I explain, businesses exist to make money, and employees are, they're tasked with helping a company sell a product, and so unfortunately, composing is not monetarily lucrative for most. So this kid, I said, hey, why don't you do this? The spreadsheet's open. Why don't you do 2 spreadsheets? One as a composer salary and one as an engineer salary. And he saw, and we use actual salary data from the Department of Labor so that it's not made up. And he began to see that the life he had envisioned for himself, he could not afford as a composer. And, so he went ahead and decided to be an engineer, and sure enough, he could make the choices and do the things that he wanted to do and, proceed. And I said, hey, here's the thing. And, he was happy about it. But to me, I just have a mom's heart, and I was like, hey, buddy, here, don't give up on your dreams. This does not mean you will never be a composer. This does not mean that you have to walk away from that. It simply means that if you start your life in debt or financial strain, then that will hurt a creative's heart to the point where, you're like, I got to compose something just so I can eat. And I, as an accountant, I'm not very creative, but I do know that when I feel pressure to put words on a page, it does not come nearly as easily. So my advice to him was, hey, be an engineer and you have the nights and weekends to compose. And you will have financial safety as an engineer, and you will compose from a place of peace. And then who knows? As your composing grows, and if you save aggressively, you can switch things around, walk away from that career and start a second chapter. But this kid talked to their parents, and the parents said, oh, you can't be a composer, you'll be homeless. The kid would have just thought that the dad or the mom was just against them. And it's not at all that we're against them. I want them to be able to live indoors and eat. And our world is so expensive that you've got to be more mindful with your choices.
I love that too. I know I have worked with a lot of students making the transition from high school to college, and then just even kind of in my local area, even talking to college students. And I think that some of what goes on is, when they go in with the blinders on and they're taking on the student debt, and there's not the return on the investment for some of those majors. And I'm like there's got to be a certain degree of, this is my heart, this is who I am. But I love that you talk about also like that balance and at least going in it with eyes open. Like, yes, I'm
Correct.
to live in a cardboard box,
Correct. For my son, he would walk into someplace like the Gaylord Hotel, or a fancy hotel. Like every now and then we get to stay there because of my husband's job or whatever, and my son would be like, oh yeah, this is right. And then when we go to a regular hotel that we pay for out of our own, he's like, why are we staying here? And so I knew he had a standard of living that would cause him frustration if he was not able to afford choices that he wants to make. Now, none of us can have everything we want, but knowing, like you said, with your eyes open, the life that you're envisioning, you've got to be able to either afford that or redesign your life. And, my daughter, she's super, super, super cheap. And so she doesn't care what hotel she stays in. And that's great. It's just about knowing yourself and knowing your vision for who and what you want to be.
What I love about like the stuff that you're talking about is it's, instead of it seeming like an isolated subject, like we're going to sit down and, we're going to work on personal finance so you can get that half credit, in high school, whatever, is that it's much more, you make it meaningful, and it's much more like, I imagine that the way that you're teaching it, it consumes them, because then it's like, they're imagining and dreaming and what kind of life do I want? And
exactly.
Impactful.
Exactly. It is great that way because, they each lesson, something happens to them. They after they get married, they spin a wheel to see if they've had a child. So every lesson after they get married is a potential to grow their family. And especially when siblings do it together, or you do it in a co-op or a group, or just a kind of like a Bible study type format, we're sitting around a TV. They love, this talking about what happened to them in their lives. I also have another wheel that I call it plot twists. Every lesson, they spin the wheel and something random happens to them. Their radiator cap breaks, their baby poops on the couch, their spouse breaks their nose playing basketball. And it's just, and every now and then there's a good one, like the grandparents take you to a free trip to Disney. And, you've got these kids who are sitting there, and one of them, a tree fell through their roof, and so they have to repair it for $2,000. And the other one is going to a free trip to Disney. Like, what? That's right. That's right. That's life. You cannot always predict, and so then that's kind of the underlying lesson is, You got to just be prepared. You got to save as much as you can, as early as you can, because as you grow, your family grows, and your expenses grow, you're going to need that safety net already established. And a lot of kids, like, I didn't figure that out till I was in my 30s, and I didn't have a safety net. It took me so long to get that safety net. And I just didn't want that for my son. And I don't want it for any kid. And once they see, oh, wait a minute, when I am 32, money's going to be tight because I'm going to have, I make one of the family members leave the workforce. And then, of course, they have kids, and money gets tight. And that's right. It just does. And so they've got this long range perspective on what their life could be like and how, the quality of their life depends on the quality of their choices. And they see it on paper, numbers don't lie. And so now they're beginning to see we're not making this up as adults. If it were that easy to be rich, we all would be. But we're not. And so, why? What happened?
I love that. And I imagine that this gives an opportunity also to talk about, like, what do we value in life and where our contentment is. And,
Exactly.
that can be different for different people, but,
Exactly.
but to at least ask yourself truthfully those questions.
That's right. That's right. Because, and that's just it. Some people and I give them a choice of 4 cars. And then I also say, with parental oversight, go to CarMax.com and, choose anything on the lot. Right. And, some kids they want a nicer car, or at least they think they do, till they see how that nicer car fits into the bigger picture. And the same thing too. I have 4 apartment complexes. One is called Budget Friendly. One is called Posh Place. And Posh Place has, not just a pool, it has a pool complex with cabanas, it has trash service, and the kids, it really makes them think, yes, I want this, but am I willing to pay for it? And am I willing to sacrifice in other areas? And they see, because a lot of times with our money, when our kids are using our money, they just feel like there's no end to it. And so, of course, they want everything because they don't recognize, at some point the money runs out. So now they see it in a budget sheet. When you spend more in this category, you have less in that category. It's very binary for them.
That sounds like a great, exercise for the students. And I can see how it would be popular just because it's so much more interactive and fun for the students.
Yes, exactly. And, I'm just an accountant, and I'm an introvert really, and certainly not a business, person out here trying to, I never would have dreamed that I would be sitting here 10 years in with this curriculum. But it worked for my son. It opened his eyes. And I just, my son, I've always told my kids, hey, you're all uniquely gifted to give something to the world. And my son was like, Mom, this is what you're meant to give to the world. And it's like, you think? He's like, yes, Mom, this is amazing. Go out and, and I'm really glad I did, just because it really has changed people's lives. I have one kid that, because of his career research, he chose to be a licensed pilot, and his mom sent a note. He just finished pilot school and he just got a job. And before, when you asked him, what do you want to be? He was like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And this sparked like something like, you know what? Research it and figure it out. So, I also let them take student loans. I tell the parents, hey, you know what? You and I both know student loans are very costly, but the students don't know it. They don't believe it. So let them, if they want to pick Harvard instead of the state school, let them take out a student loan and walk through it. They'll see that student loan in their budget for 10 years. And when my students do that, you should hear them when they pay it off in lesson 11 or something like that. I'm like, okay, student loans are paid off. And they're like, oh my goodness, I thought I'd never pay it off. And, I tell you, I had one kid who, I promise you that there's no way when it comes time to actually paying for college, he's going to do a student loan, because he was so saddled with that debt that he hated it. And, that words alone are never going to get, it's just going to be head knowledge. But this takes it from the head to the heart, because they see it for themselves and it becomes about them.
I love that. I know that sometimes, like we think, oh, we learn by our mistakes, but this gives you a chance to kind of pretend the mistakes.
Exactly. I mean, the hardest lessons I've learned have been because I messed it up. But you buy that first boat at 22 because you have all this extra money, because life really isn't all that expensive at 22. And so you buy a boat thinking you've got plenty. Man, that is a lesson that you can't take back. And so I'd rather them mess it up here, because you can always go back, make different choices. It's like that cool Choose Your Own Adventure book, that we loved when we were kids. What would happen if I didn't do this? Oh, you can see for yourself.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So if there was like one, I guess, piece of advice relative to personal finance that you just wanted to make sure every parent was, beginning to share with their student, even before, they're maybe
Sure.
going through the curriculum, what would that be?
I would encourage parents to get money into the hands of their students, because we learn through practice. Money is a tool, like a piano, like a soccer ball. All of that is learned through physical touch practice. So I give them money, but give them a task to use the money for. It's not free money. I don't tie money and chores together, because then you kind of have a labor strike and I'm not going to clean the potty unless you give me more money or whatever, any of that. So I don't do that. But instead, I just put money in the kids' hands and say, this money is now to be used for your whatever it is, toys, snacks, clothes, games, whatever it is they are wanting. Give them a little bit at a time and let them practice saving and spending and making mistakes on a small scale rather than waiting until the dollars are much larger.
Well, this sounds like a very exciting program. I appreciate your time sharing it.
Yes, well, thank you again for having me. It is so different than anything out there on the market, that a lot of times it's hard to understand without talking it through. So I appreciate every opportunity that I'm given to actually just explain what went on in my head when I made this.
Well, that sounds great. Well, thank you very much. We enjoyed having
you. Thanks for having me.
Sounds like a great program. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.